Lord, help us to see you more clearly, to love you more dearly, to follow you more nearly, day by day. Amen. Y'all, today I want to talk a little bit, based on our gospel reading, about if everything belongs to God, then how are we to decide how we're going to use those things that are God's? But before I talk about the gospel real quick, I want us to actually back up and take a little look at that Old Testament reading that Jim read for us. Because, you see, Moses appears to be mad. I read him as being mad in this story. And the rabbi, Jonathan Sacks, taught a lesson on this story about Moses and his anger. And basically, he depicted it as, Moses is tired of being sent out to do God's work and feeling like God's not there with him. And he's kind of saying, come on, God, I'm so glad that you're doing all this stuff. I'm glad to be your servant and to do it with you, but, can you join in and do it with us? And what Rabbi Sacks reminds us of is that God's people have spent a lot of time seeing the majesty and the power of God, right? The parting of the Red Sea, the pillars of cloud and the pillars of fire, and the manna from the thin air, right? But what they're craving is a sense of intimacy and the closeness of God. Not just the power of God, but the closeness of God. They want to see God there with them. So let's hold on to that idea as we look in this gospel reading about craving this, not just the power of God, but the intimacy of God. In our gospel story for today, you see the Pharisees are trying to catch Jesus in a trap, right? They're trying to get him to commit an act of treason, so they've got an excuse to do him in, get rid of him. But Jesus won't fall for their trap. He doesn't fall for it. He basically says, give to the emperor that which is the emperor's. Give to God that which is God's. And so they've unwittingly actually fallen into God's trap, Jesus' trap. Because you can say, give the coin to the emperor all you want, but what Jesus knows is that the emperor is not going to live forever. And everything the emperor has, all his power, everything the emperor ever will be, ultimately belongs to God. It's a good reminder for all of us, especially when we live in a society that sometimes, our value, our literal value, is measured by our accumulation of stuff. How many dollars are in our bank account? How many square feet is our house? How many books do we have on the bookshelf? And how many trophies are in the trophy case? Is literally how we get valued sometimes. And it's an important reminder for us to remember that none of that. We won't be here forever, right? Just like the emperor. Every dollar in our bank accounts ultimately belongs to God. Every hour of our lives that we ever have and ever will have ultimately belongs to God. All the love in our hearts, all the strength in our bones belong to God. So I want to take us back again to that question of how are we going to use it? If this is all God's, if this all belongs to God, then how are we to use it in the way that God would have us use it? And this is where I want to take us back to that Old Testament reading of craving that intimacy of God. If we're making choices to take the things that are God's, and we're using it, seeking that kind of love and intimacy, then we will be using God's wealth in the way that God would have us use it. If we're using the money that we have to provide for our children, to provide for our loved ones, keep a roof over people's heads, it's intimate and the way God would have us be using it. If we're using it to help a stranger in need, it's intimate. And we'll find that when we do that, when we take the wealth that we have and use it to support those around us in need, you'll feel that intimacy of God's presence there. If we take the time that we've been given by God, that belongs to God, and we use it to go and feed the hungry, or to sit down with a child and help them with their schoolwork, or to sit down and read some devotional material or a self-help book and improve our minds and hearts and spirits, there will be that intimacy of God's presence there. If we take the love that we've been given in our hearts that also belongs to God, and we share that love generously with those around us, the alien in our land, the stranger in our midst, the neighbor at our doorstep, everyone made in the image of God around us, then we feel that intimacy of God that Moses and his people so desperately craved. At the end of the day, if we take this little reminder with us that everything we have and everything we ever will have is God's, and we remember to share it generously, and I'm not just saying this as the reminder that I'm still looking for one more person for our vestry, and that stewardship season is coming up really soon. It's not a bait and switch for that. But seriously, in an understanding that if we take of those things that we have and we generously share them with the people around us that are made in the image of God, then we too, just like Moses and his people, will find that we achieve that same sense of the intimacy and the power and the majesty of God around us. Thanks be to God. Amen.